My name is Rajman Rai. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Biomedical Informatics at Harvard Medical School, and I'm a co-organizer of this event. I'd like to give, first of all, a warm welcome to all of you joining us in person and virtually for the 8th Annual Precision Medicine Conference. I'm delighted to introduce our opening speaker, Jimmy Olaher. As we heard from Dean Daly, Jimmy is a pioneer. He was born with sickle cell disease, and he was one of the first individuals to undergo an experimental CRISPR-based gene editing treatment. Today, we're lucky to be able to hear about his journey, so please join me in welcoming Jimmy to the podium.
Hey, everyone. So I wanted to start this with something hearty, like my twins over there, given the subject matter might get dark. So let's move on. How did I get here? I was born with sickle cell anemia. My parents both had the sickle cell trait, both AS. Both of my parents are Nigerian, and at the time in Nigeria, they didn't have the amniocentesis test that would usually confirm your child has a genetic disorder. But I was fortunate enough that my father and my mother, they were able to come to the US and get that test done here. And that test did, in fact, confirm I would have sickle cell. My mother decided to have me here in the States, and that made me become an American citizen. And I believe that probably saved my life many times over, just the fact that I was born here in the US. I can't tell you what it's like growing up with sickle cell in Nigeria, which to an extent I did. After we were born here, we moved back to Nigeria for about, after I was born here, I moved back to Nigeria, and it was really, really difficult. But as a kid, your crises are not as bad when you're a child. They tend to get progressively worse as you grow older. So managing pain in Nigeria was extremely difficult. I remember two things. Advil, Tylenol, and a menthol. That's all we had. And I remember my parents overnight, my mom and my dad taking turns, massaging my back, trying to alleviate my pain. And what I remember of that, it was constant, and it felt like it never ended. So it was quite difficult. And then, I had the good fortune of having to move here because I was born here. I wanted to take advantage of the healthcare system, the schooling, all of that good stuff that comes with the West. And I remember coming here, and I was still pediatric at that time, and they gave me this information about what to do when you have a sickle cell crisis. And there's this little pamphlet that has called 911. And one day I had this terrible sickle cell crisis, and I, was able to force myself to my bedside and grab this pamphlet. And the first thing I did was, like the pamphlet said, call 911. About 5 minutes later, I saw lights outside the window, and I'm completely shocked because I've never had this experience before. Usually what my crises are literally just crying in bed until it stopped. And the ambulance, the techs, they came straight into the house. They could see how bad shape I was in, and they instantly gave me something at least to be able to let me communicate with them because the pain at the time was that bad. Shortly after, they transported me into the ambulance, and I remember getting to the emergency room. I believe it was Robert Wood Johnson at the time. I was living in New Jersey, just being rushed through this hallway with all the lights hitting my face. And I finally got into a room, and they saw how bad my pain was, and the next thing they did was they gave me a round of IV morphine. And I almost cursed because of how that made me feel the first time. I was completely in shock that for the first 5, 6, 7 years of my life, I had gone through severe pain. And across the pond, there's something that could instantly alleviate my pain just like that. Obviously, that comes with its own consequences in the long run. But to me as a kid, I was shocked and obviously happy. I couldn't believe what had just happened, that for years I'd suffered from this pain that could be alleviated instantly. And that was literally my first experience in the ER here in the US. I also, another strange stories growing up in Nigeria and comparing it here to the US. There was this thing I used to do in school. I would, at the end of class, I would go to the chalkboard and take as many pieces of broken chalk that the teacher had used, and I'll put it in my back pocket, and I'll go home. And when no one's looking, I'll start eating chalk, foam, all these strange things I'll find myself ingesting, and no one knew about it because I was so embarrassed. Why is this kid eating chalk? And fast forward to when I moved to the US, I had this support group where a doctor came to me and asked me a few questions. Yeah, I do eat chalk. How do you know that? Yeah, I do eat foam. How did you know that? It's called pica or pica. It's a deficiency, a nutrient deficiency that, that creates your body needing nutrition. And the whole time growing up in Nigeria, I was so embarrassed and so ashamed to tell people this was happening to me. And here in the US, someone, diagnosed it instantly. So this, I wanted to really show the difference between the two healthcare systems. So how do I make a life here? Obviously, coming to the US and realizing that I have sickle cell and it's a pretty tough disease, we had to put a plan in place, my wife and I. One, we knew I wasn't going to be employable because I was literally living in the hospital, particularly in the winter months. It was nonstop in and out of the hospital, and I had a lot of ambition, so that was extremely painful, knowing that there were so many things I wanted to do, but I have this chronic illness that won't allow me to do it. So what we decided to do was literally plan everything to the T. From one of the most important steps we made in our lives was making sure that I was my own, I was self-employed. I didn't have to depend on someone for employment because of what my life was like. Another thing was planning, for a family afterwards. We knew that somehow sickle cell would rear its ugly head when it came to family planning as well. So that was something that we had planned for pre-COVID, pre-transplant, and all of that. So, having a chronic illness, it really helps to have a plan in place. And I'm really fortunate that I had a partner that's really good at planning and, helped me put a path that would allow me to at least somewhat get something out of life. So living in New Jersey, things started getting progressively worse. More hospital visits, many more complications. I remember I don't even know how young I was, but I had my gallbladder taken out quite early. I had a heart attack twice. One was actually from having a portacat put in. And the doctor, I guess he didn't know my sickle cell history, and he decided not to give me a blood transfusion for this particular procedure, and it ended up giving me a heart attack. It was bad. I remember just, in life, when you hit rock bottom and you think, all right, I'm at the worst part in my life right now, so it's only going to get better from here. But sickle cell is different. When you hit rock bottom, you fall into a trap door, and you keep falling. It's this constant state of falling because it's one thing after the other. One day you lose your vision for 24 hours, and then you get it back, and you think you're good. The next day you have a heart attack. It's constant. So that was extremely difficult for me. I remember the frequent hospitalizations really took a severe toll on my mental health. But what really made it bad was the fact that I just didn't see any end in sight. Quite resourceful, so I'm doing research and I'm seeing all these other conditions being cured or finding a cure, or a lot of people working on it. But for sickle cell, I couldn't see anything. I couldn't see, no one was working on anything. It was just a dark hole where I thought that I was going to be falling constantly forever. And it really, really took a toll on my mental health. I mentor a lot of young people with sickle cell, and I always try to, when I spend time with them, my goal is to right now inform them about the people like you in this room that are helping them or are helping in the process of working on creating a cure for them. Because that's the hardest part of sickle cell, is not knowing that there's anything going on. You know, so that's one of the goals with this precision medicine, is to make sure that people know about it. And what were my normal treatments pre-trial? So my normal treatments pre-trial were a bunch of different things. So we started off with hydroxyurea, you know, that helped a little bit, and we transitioned to hydration therapy. I don't know if that's a thing, but, you know, the doctor I was seeing at the time wanted to hydrate me every 2 weeks just to make sure that my red blood cells weren't clumping up too much. Multiple blood transfusions. I remember having to go on something called Jadanu because my iron overload was so high because I had had so many blood transfusions. So they were really not tangible, nothing really tangible that improved my quality of life in terms of what the treatments were like. And it really, really got bad. It really started affecting my mental health as well. You know, I keep on touching on that word mental health because, you know, physical pain, crisis pain is, most people think it's the hallmark of a sickle cell patient. You know, it's the pain you go through, but I will almost argue it's the mental side as well, that not many people know what you're going through. And it gets really bad. So what were the normal avenues for a cure? Normally, everyone knows that the main avenue for cures with sickle cell was a bone marrow transplant. At the time, I did not want to do a bone marrow transplant just from what I had seen, how long it took to recover, and how much I had to take out of my life or take absence of my life in order to pursue this bone marrow transplant. So for me, I had completely removed that from my mind. I had perished the thought of having a bone marrow transplant, to my parents' disappointment. But you know, being parents, they kept on pushing me to do something to improve my quality of life. And I kept looking at one point, I was actually tired of their incessant, and it's completely normal being a parent, I'll do the same thing now, but I actually got tired of them bothering me to find a solution to this sickle cell anemia that I was literally taking a stronghold of my life. And then I started doing research, and I found this thing called gene editing. I remember, I think I saw an article about a doctor in China who had done something I probably shouldn't repeat here, but it was interesting for me. I'm like, oh, if you can do that, I wonder if you could do it and cure diseases. And, you know, I looked into it. I'm like, all right, this is probably some really cool science fiction stuff. It's going to happen 10, 20, 50 years from now. You know what? I'm going to put a Google alert, so if I see any more information on gene editing as it relates to sickle cell, I'll know about it. And I reported back to my parents, hey guys, I found something, you know, that's probably going to work. I don't know when it's going to happen, maybe 20, maybe 50 years from now, but it's gene editing, and I'm excited about it. Now, please leave me alone. And then 2 years later, I got an email in my inbox from NPR about someone called Victoria Gray, who had gone through the same, or has gone through a gene editing CRISPR-Cas9 trial. And for me, it was quite inspiring because I've always had this tick of wanting to be a father. And Victoria's story in that NPR article literally just highlighted how her life had been so hard, and it had taken her away from the parent she wanted to be. And it just stuck out with me. My wife was 8 months pregnant at the time, and just living with the disease, I knew sickle cell was going to take me away from fatherhood. So I decided to reach out to Dr. Frank Gould and his team, and literally called me back the next day. That's how great this man is. He called me back the next day. I left a voicemail, and my wife and I talked to him. And before we knew it, they were flying us out to Nashville to get qualified for the clinical trial. We get there, I do all the pre-consent stuff. You know, you do all these tests to make sure that, you know, you're sick enough, but at the same time healthy enough to go through the rigors of a trial. And fortunately for me, I qualified, and it was literally the start of a new life for me. My life is completely different than what it used to be. Before, when I would travel for work, I do e-commerce, so we go to trade shows, places where we showcase our products. I remember I'll travel, I'll go to the Atlanta's Mart, Vegas, all these places. It will literally take me 2 weeks to recover from a flight because of the air pressure and all of that. My sister used to live in the UK, and I'll go visit her. By the time I land, my ankles will swell up this big, the size of a baseball, and I'll have to, sit and rest when my family's out seeing London, or when I'm supposed to be working with my team. I'm literally stuck in the hospital. That's how bad the disease got. Now I'm able to travel as many times as possible. I've actually been in Boston twice this week, back and forth, and no complications, nothing whatsoever. Another funny story is I remember traveling. I usually had travel with a bunch of pills in my bag, from hydroxyurea, Jadanu, morphine, long-acting, short-acting, everything. And once in a while, I would get stopped by security, and they'll be concerned, and hey, what's this? And I'll explain. I usually have a note. This time on my trip here, I got stopped by security as well, and I thought I had taken all those pills out from my bag. I don't need them anymore. And he looked really, really serious, the security agent, the TSA agent, and he called me. They pulled me over to the side, and they opened my bag, and they showed me 2 diapers. And I'm like, it's just diapers. I'm trying to figure out why. And then I realized, oh, diapers, traveling. And if you guys remember a certain thing that happened back in the day with someone traveling with diapers, it was not a good memory at all. So it's safe to say that the irony was lost on me on that, because I didn't know what was going on until they really explained to me, hey, someone literally tried to fly with a bomb in his underwear about 10 years ago, if you don't remember. So that's how life has changed now. Now I'm getting stopped for diapers instead of pain pills. And yeah, it's been 180 degrees now. I'm able to go out and dream. I think that for me, that was one of the hardest things living with sickle cell, is just not able to dream. Every night I'm on my computer and I'm seeing all these cool things I want to do and seeing what other people are doing. And every night I'll make a promise to myself, hey, no matter how hard tomorrow is, just try and wake up and get one thing done that gets you closer to where you want to get. Just try. And every morning I failed. Every single morning I failed. Every day. That heartbreak of being afraid to dream is also another part of sickle cell that's so underlooked. Just being stuck to a bed nonstop and watching the world move on without you is a very, very painful experience. And I'm grateful I don't have to go through that anymore. I hope we can continue to make serious strides in this specific space with this specific technology to help other people feel like how I feel now, So post-transplant, life is good. Great family. I'm able to swim. Before, swimming was literally a ticket to the hospital, like clockwork. And sometimes I would do it just to fit in. I had this massive fear of, missing out, that I would put myself in positions that I know at the end of this, I would be in a lot of pain, but, it was worth it. I remember actually a while ago in a similar amphitheater like this, it was NJIT, because I grew up in NJ and in New Jersey, and they wanted me to come and give this tech conference, and I was in the emergency room at the time, and I was not going to make it if I, didn't get discharged. My wife and I, obviously, to her disappointment, we actually signed myself out, because I was like, I'm not missing this opportunity to speak at NJIT. I'm going to sign myself out and go do this thing, and whatever happens next happens. At one point, that's how literally I decided to live with sickle cell. It's like, I don't care. I'm going to try and have a life as much as I can and let the chips fall where they do, and I will see how that goes. So life's good now. I'm really fortunate. If you look at my life, from my story of my parents being able to fly me to the US for a test, to the type of partner I have at home and the kids I have, the family I have, my mother, my father. It's been this thread of good fortune, which has followed me everywhere. I know my story here may seem not fortunate, but I feel like the luckiest guy in the world, you know? So that's what my new normal is like, being able to do everything I've always imagined that I could do, being able to travel and work and take care of my family. It's really been a blessing. What was the most helpful as you navigated the past few years? For me, the most helpful has been my partner. Not the past few years, actually in our entire 2 decades of knowing each other. Like I said, I've been really, really fortunate to have the partner I have. I remember we had a doctor's appointment that she came with me to a while ago when I was still much younger and very immature. The doctor referred to her as my caregiver, and I was livid. I remember going home, I'm like, babe, you are not my caregiver. I can take care of myself. Meanwhile, this is a woman that she was the one with the full-time job. She'll wake up in the morning, and she'll literally stagger meals around the house for me because I couldn't move sometimes. It's like, all right, I'm gonna put his breakfast right next to his computer on his desk, his bedside desk. When he goes to the bathroom, I'm gonna leave him his lunch by the entrance to the bathroom. When eventually he wants to get out of the house, I'm gonna leave, a snack. And here I am, arguing with this person that, she's not my caregiver. So I feel bad for that. But obviously now she knows that she's my number one caregiver. And now I'm actually trying to turn the roles and be the caregiver. She's done such a great job. But specifically in the past few years, what's really made this what really made me navigate this quite well has been, I have to give a lot of credit to Dr. Frangula and his team at Nashville. They really had a human-centered approach to treating my condition. I actually remember a story, one of his head researchers, Amanda Stoltz, was in the hospital in Nashville, and we had just made an arduous trip from Atlanta. I did most of the driving, and I was in a bit of pain. And she, ordered some pain medication for me to, feel better. But with sickle cell, the first round usually never goes anywhere. But because I've been so scarred by past doctors of asking for another round of pain medication, I actually had a doctor tell me once that I needed a drug holiday because pain medications weren't working. So I was so embarrassed to ask for another round of medication, but I don't know how she knew. She had just picked it up instantly, like, I think you need something else, Is it okay if I give you something else? And I almost cried. Dr. Frangula, I'm in love with them over there at Nashville. It's one big family. You should see when I go in there for my reunions, or I call them reunions, and it's actually not a reunion, it's a follow-up, but that's what it feels like. It feels like a reunion. Dr. Frangula, Dr. Clincaro, Dr. Dom, Amanda, Kayla, I see you, Blake, they really helped us navigate this specific trial. I don't think enough credit is given to teams like that really make you feel comfortable with the disease you have. I'll give you another example of how comfortable I was with Dr. Frangula and his team. I'm a big Liverpool fan, Liverpool Football Club. And one day, I just had chemo, by the way, on the floor at TriStar Centennial. I'm having this somewhat okay day. I'm going through the conditioning of chemotherapy, so it's not easy, but it's not a hard day. Liverpool's on the telly, so I'm happy a little bit. Really, really tough game, man. We're at the 90th second, and Liverpool score. And usually when Liverpool scores at home, I go crazy. I'm running around the house, and my son doesn't even know what I'm celebrating. He starts running around the house with me, celebrating this kid. And Dr. Frangula and his team has made me so comfortable that when we got that 90-minute goal, I literally jumped out of bed, took my pole, and I tried to run and do a knee slide on the hospital floor. And that is, if you know me, I'm quite a reserved person. The only people that see my craziness are my wife and my kids. But I was so comfortable doing that there because of how comfortable they had made me feel. And I remember, I think Eileen was the nurse that was seeing me that day. She came and like, what the heck is Jimmy doing? You know, but yeah, I really got fortunate, you know, in just having them as my team as well. How can patients be made aware of these treatments? So yeah, this is a big thing. You know, I feel like a lot of people don't have enough information to what's going on in terms of their specific condition, and not just sickle cell. Obviously, sickle cell is, I think, you know, well, really underrepresented, but in chronic illnesses in general, you know, the rare ones. I remember actually, if I hadn't done my research, I never would have found this trial. You know, I remember after we had qualified and I had told my hematologist about it, he actually told me the trial was closed. And I was, what? I just talked to Dr. Frango, how could it be closed? You know, so I think, you know, there's more work to be done in how we let the general population know about the clinical trials that are upcoming. You know, has anyone been to clinicaltrial.gov lately? That site is in need of a massive update. I mean, the next generation is not going to go on that. You know, I think we need to think of ways we can get this news out to people and meet them where they are through social media and other unique types of marketing. You know, I think that we've forgotten about that a little bit, and we need to figure out how to make sure that patients are knowing that people are working on their behalf to find solutions for their conditions. In the previous slide, I talked about a kid I mentor in Atlanta, young girl. She had a pretty bad experience with sickle cell and is still going through it. I remember her mom having a conversation with me. She had recently just got discharged from the hospital, Emory, in Atlanta. And on her way home, she saw an officer with a weapon in his holster. And you know what she did? She ran towards it because she wanted to take the gun and end her life. That's how bad people are feeling because they don't know that there's work being done to alleviate the conditions they're going through. So I think that's a missed opportunity, that we're not doing a good enough job about letting people know, you know, what's in the pipeline. Oh. So what key challenges should scientists and medical community be solving for? So many things, but I have a few specific ones. I think specifically in relation to gene editing, and obviously this is going to be fixed because I was one of the first ones to do it, so this is still new, but you know, the collection process, that I think that could be a bit more streamlined, a bit more easier. I'm sure, you know, that goes without saying. I'm sure everyone knows that. But yeah, I did my collection 4 times, which Dr. Frango and we thought I was going to do it once, but I ended up doing it 4 times, and it wasn't easy. It was probably one of the hardest parts of the clinical trial for me was the collection, the identity loss I actually faced right after I could feel the effects of my new DNA kicking in. I'm a person that usually had, for my whole life, 35, 36 years, I had used pain to motivate me. You know, when I needed to get something done, I'd find a way to equate it to my pain and get it done. And one day I woke up and literally I couldn't feel any pain anymore. And instead of being joyful that I'm not in pain, I was actually lost, which actually made me more angry. I'm like, why aren't you happy? You know, so that was another thing that was quite difficult for me, was trying to figure out what my new identity would be without sickle cell. And we're probably going to face a lot of challenges getting people to enroll in clinical trials because their diseases are so enmeshed with who they are. It's going to be difficult, but I think we can do a good job at convincing people. But yeah, that collection process, I think it can be a bit streamlined. One thing that I think that could be really cool and unique if there's a way to track your progress or track the DNA progress, where it's at after collection, where it's at in the manufacturing process, could be quite helpful. This is something massive that's going on. You know, I remember Dr. Clint Carroll, one of my appointments, he told me what I had just accomplished here was the medical equivalent of landing on the moon. And I couldn't think of that because, one, I'm not a medical person, but if I had something, you know, that's constantly reminding me, hey, we just collected your DNA, it's in here now, we edited it, and just really educate me about the big thing we're doing here, I think that would be quite powerful. And then the affordability of such a treatment like this. I went through it. I saw how big and how massive it was. And I've asked many times, how much does this thing cost? No one can give me an answer yet, but I always ask. And I don't know if anyone knows someone called a professional basketball player called Carlos Boozer. I believe he used to play for the Chicago Bulls, Lakers. He had a son that had sickle cell anemia. And he's a professional basketball player. I mentioned that, I think. I wanted to highlight it again. But his son had this disease, and obviously because he was in a great place financially, they were able to afford to cure his son. Not through a traditional bone marrow transplant. They did something quite unique where, you know, they did IVF to cure sickle cell. You know, they collected his wife's eggs. They made sure that they did the genetic testing, made sure that these babies didn't have sickle cell. And then, obviously, they implanted it. She had 2 sets of twins. And they now used the discarded cord blood for a stem cell transplant for, I believe his name was Kamani Boozer. And that actually cured him to the tune of $2 million. Not a lot of us have $2 million sitting in our bank account, you know? So affordability is very, very important in terms of this specific gene editing clinical trial. It needs to be widely accessible. There's 100,000 people that suffer from sickle cell in the US. There's 4 million in West Africa. I don't even know what the numbers are worldwide. So let's say we cure everyone in the US, that's not even 10% of the world population, you know? So globalization, which leads me to my next point, is where this needs to go. I'm obviously, being in the West, the technology is going to be built here, you know, but the goal right after should be, how do we get this to the world as soon as possible? And before we go into Q&A, you know, I wanted to just say one more thing and really just highlight the importance of what this precision medicine is doing for my life and what it's going to do for other people's lives. They say, you know, the wealthiest place in the world is New York City, I believe. It has about 500,000 millionaires. I read a book once. I think his name was Les Brown, and he says the wealthiest place in the world is actually the graveyard, where dreams have gone and died, where inventions have never had a chance of seeing day, where cures, scientists have had cures, and they've never had a chance to bring those cures to life because, you know, obviously they've perished. And of course, we're still going to have, you know, that's normal. You know, a good part of life is dying. It's actually a change agent. So people are still going to die with their dreams. But specifically for people like me with chronic illnesses, you know, just having the chance, you know, to go out and achieve your dreams is such a powerful concept. It's normal for everyone else, but for us, it's powerful. Whoa, I can wake up and not have to do what sickle cell tells me to do. I can actually wake up and do what I want to do. You know, I know it seems mundane, but to me, that's quite special. You know, and at the end of the day, if we don't end up achieving those dreams that we want to achieve, I'm glad that the blame is on me. I'm glad that I failed, not sickle cell made me fail, you know? Thank you. And
So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jimmy, so much for sharing your story. We'd like to open it up to questions. So if you're in person, you can come to either of the two mics on the floor here on the bottom floor, or there's a mic on the top as well. And for our virtual audience as well, you can ask questions in the chat of the YouTube Live, and we'll relay them to Jimmy here. So maybe I'll start off, just to take moderator's prerogative here. Jimmy, amazing story, amazing journey. I was curious, so I think you mentioned, how you became aware of the study of this trial. You read an NPR article. It sounded like there was some positive parental pressure that was actually over multiple generations that was pushing you in that direction. But I'm curious, I think you hinted that we need something more than what we have on clinicaltrials.gov to broaden this message, to reach a younger audience, a broader audience. What do you see? How do you see that taking shape? Are these better social media campaigns? Are these new websites? Are they going into the community, meeting people where they are? What do you think would be most effective to get the message out?
Absolutely. So I'm in e-commerce, and the best way to sell something is by telling a story. So we need to tell more stories and use mediums like social media, like you mentioned, YouTube, TikTok, and all of those specific examples you mentioned, as long as there's story behind it. And when people can connect, I literally saw myself in Victoria Gray, just in her parenthood journey. And I instantly connected with that. So if we can find good ways to tell stories and use tools that are relevant now, I think that could be quite helpful. Hi.
That was a touching story.
Thank you.
And so I'm originally from Ghana, and it resonated a lot with me, and I thought I would make this comment. I've seen people living with sickle cell, and growing up is hard to see people sick, and you are playing, and they cannot even participate. The impact it even have with the other colleagues is you feel it, that you can all be playing and someone just cannot move, and it's quite sad to see it. So on my comment is, I know you are putting some advocacy. How are we making it accessible to especially people on different parts of the world? How is the technology gone so far? And how can we improve even management of the disease? As you said, probably not everyone can go through the entire treatment, but managing the pain, and what are the sources, some avenues that people can use to improve that?
Yeah, thank you. The world is a global village these days. So in terms of getting the message and getting the story to different parts of the world, I think that's quite easy and quite seamless now, actually. I have people that reach out to me actually the majority of the people that reach out to me are not based here in the US. They're based in third world countries like Africa. So the stories are actually getting out there. The challenge is we're not able to get the technology out there. Obviously, technology and a story are two different things. But I think with time and technological advancements, that would not be a problem as well.
Yes, thank you, Jimmy, to share your story. When was the last time you have a sickle cell crisis after the transplant? Second question, among the 7 patients they have this transplant, how many of them are as lucky as you, they are fully recovered? Thank you.
For the first question, I have not had a crisis at all. Post-transplant, I haven't had any sickle cell crisis. I'm actually doing too well. I'm not going to go into the details of what that means, but I'm doing too well. That's how good it is. And in terms of how many patients, from the data I see, I think most 7 patients are doing quite well. I don't know the details of their individual stories, but high level, I think they're doing as good as I am, hopefully.
Thank you very much for speaking. To follow up on another question, even within the United States, obviously this is extremely limited availability. And I think the point you made about clinicaltrials.gov and others being better is really important. But how would you suggest as a patient trying to handle the messaging when you're still not going to be able to enroll that many patients in what is hopefully a successful therapy?
I think specifically with patients is the medical jargon needs to come out of it a little bit, you know, to get it to the patient level. I think there's a lot of work being done. I've actually participated in a few where, you know, these consent forms are these big library books, and, you know, for someone as desperate as myself, I didn't read it. My wife made me read it, but I can see most patients not wanting to read it as well because they just want to get a cure ASAP. But I think if we simplify the message, one, by removing all of the medical jargon and just made it a bit more digestible, that could be helpful.
Thank you very much. And actually leveraging in the last point that you raised, your story is powerful, it's inspiring, give hopes. But at the same time, I think that like the medical community has caused for long a lot of hurts and scars that is difficult to reconcile. And being an advocate for clinical trial with like ethnic groups or racial groups that has been used in the past to create like great success for the humanity as like African Americans, like what vocabulary or words would you like definitely make the research community know? Like for instance, how would you use the alternative of the word research or clinical trials to a wording that gives actually trust and hope?
I think using patients, you know, using patients that speak, you know, come from those specific communities. And it's so powerful what representation can do when someone takes a first step at doing something and everyone else that looks similar to that person that does something, that goes a long way. You know, so I think it continued, and I think that's being done right now. I think it's just us having to double down on that, use that same strategy, not just with gene editing, but just many chronic diseases and all the variety of clinical trials out there. Using patients that look like them could be very helpful.
Thanks, and thanks for your courage.
Thank you.
So Jimmy, maybe I'll ask one more question. So I think you spoke about the information. So, you know, I was really struck by the team aspect of of CARE at Nashville, led by Dr. Frangoul and his colleagues. You know, there's a tremendous amount of information that you received. I was wondering if you could highlight, you know, what the key bits were in that initial decision to actually enroll in the study that really led you to feel comfortable and to feel that this was safe, and to feel that, you know, as a pioneer, that you were at least walking in with somewhat of a map and somewhat of a good destination.
I'm laughing because I'm not gonna be able to answer that because I didn't have any of that. I looked at it and the consent form, and nothing bothered me at all. I didn't have a roadmap. I didn't care as to what could potentially happen in the future. I mean, I saw a few things like we could potentially edit the wrong DNA, and, you know, I knew that. But from where I was 3 years ago, I was so desperate that none of that actually had an impact in my decision. I call it a risk analysis I had done. You know, I was looking down the barrel of fatherhood, and after living with sickle cell for 35 years and knowing how demanding, it's a demanding companion, sickle cell, knowing how demanding it could be, I knew I was going to win that battle. And I'm like, all right, this is one battle I think I want to win. And even if something could potentially come up with this trial, I was more than happy to take the risk. But that being said, there's a lot of work to be done to stop people like me from making decisions like that without actually, reading the consent form. Or, there's going to be a lot of desperate people out there, and I think you could put roadblocks in places to make sure that, is this in fact something you want to go down? For example, maybe instead of having you and your family member reviewing the consent form alone, there could be a patient advocate as well with you. Maybe we can kind of force you to actually look at what is, going to happen with this clinical trial. Awesome, no problem.
So please join me in thanking Jimmy again, and let's turn it over now to Zach for the first panel.
Thank you.